with John Towndrow and Neil Macmillan here at Knox. We are, it's quite an exhibit you've got over here. Somebody's going to give us a tour.
Okay.
Neil?
So, certainly. This is a very amazing story that we've kind of discovered over the last 6 weeks. It's a story of what we call escape from the Holocaust. Although today is what is called Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. So the Cornwall Interfaith Partnership is hosting this year's commemoration in Cornwall. And in the course of our research, we discovered that a Jewish family escaped from Lithuania just before the war and then just after the war. It was an extended family of the parents and then two of their married children with their respective families. And that's the story. The family is called the Kaplans.
And Mayor Horowitz was mayor of Cornwall at that time, right?
Yes, he was.
Okay.
Yes.
Did he play a role in that?
He didn't play any role at the time, but later two of the family members were taken to a hockey game in Montreal by Horowitz, and they remember that. So I don't know if you can see the display on the camera, but let's start with Lithuania. What you see here is the port city of Macmillan, which is also called Klaipėda. This was part of Germany up until the end of the First World War, and then it was given to Lithuania. And Hitler, as we know, prior to the Second World War, was gradually taking back different parts of former German territory. And in March 1939, he gave an ultimatum to the Lithuanian government to take back Memel, or what's called the Memel territory. So the original family, we have a photograph of them, it's not very clear, but there was a man called Sussman and Hindi Kaplan, and they lived in this very nice house here. That house on the right was their house. It's almost like a palace. And they lived there with their 4 children. And the very day they heard that Hitler had said this ultimatum, they left right away. And they went to the capital of Lithuania called Towndrow. They stayed there, and now they had to get out of Lithuania. At this time, there was this man here, Marius Sorensen, who is Canadian Pacific Railway's agent in Scandinavia, trying to get farm settlers to populate all the CPR lands in the prairies that the CPR had received as payment for the railway. I think it's like 2 million acres or 200, an enormous amount of land. So they were seeking anybody with good farming experience in Europe, and they went to Scandinavia.
But they weren't taking in Jews for that purpose.
No. At that time, Canada had a very
restrictive,
excluded Jews, and this comes out in the story. Now, Sorensen was finding, and this is recorded in a book, a well-known book called None is Too Many, which is
I see right there,
an anonymous statement. Yeah, this is like a piece of historical research came out in the 80s by Irving Abella and Harold Troper. Irving Abella is a professor at York University, and Harold Troper is used to be a professor at OISE, Ontario Institute of Studies in Education. We contacted Irving Abella about Marius Sorensen, and he said it's very appropriate that you're celebrating him because he is a real hero. But of all these 3 heroes, he's the one that's least well known. The other 2 have been officially recognized by the Jewish state as risking their lives to save many Jews during the war.
So they've been given righteous status?
Yeah, they're called righteous among nations. There's approximately 24,000 Gentiles or non-Jews that have been recognized by the State of Israel since 1953 with this status. So, but anyway, Marius, he was just looking for good people for Canada, regardless of religion, whatever. And he was proposing, in some cases, business people with enormous resources, factory owners, to Canada. And they were being turned down by immigration. And in those days, immigration in Canada was not a big department like it is today. It was actually in the Department of Mines. And there was a man running it called Frederick Charles Blair. And he was, in the book, he is described as being anti-Semitic. And he systematically turned down all these what would seem to be highly qualified applicants. In the case of the Kaplans, Sussman Kaplan had lived on an estate. He was quite well off. And he'd worked with his tenant farmers. So he could claim that he knew a little bit about farming. He didn't actually know that much. Anyway, they got a visa to go to Canada, and before the war, March 1939. So they got a boat. They came in what was called a Doukhobor immigrant boat called what was the name again?
The SS Montclair.
Montclair, thank you. Because we went on the web and we found the boat. Because this picture here is the immigration arrival of the family. They came by boat and we saw Montclair, so we went on the web and we found a picture of the boat, which is, you'll see it there. That's the Montclair that the Kaplan family came in 1939. So they arrived in Montreal in July in a heatwave. And they came out to Williamstown. He looked around for different farms, and there was an abandoned farm, and he bought it. So the Kaplans had the 2 parents and the 4 children in Williamstown. Okay? So that's the first step. Now, when Hitler actually invaded Lithuania in September, or maybe later on, the Jews were now trying to get out of Lithuania, and at that time there was a high population of Jews in Lithuania. There was beforehand, because Lithuania was a center of Jewish learning in Europe, and also refugees were coming from Poland. Now, one of the refugees, who was a Dutch Jew, he got a visa to go to Curacao in the Dutch Caribbean, right down near Venezuela. And when the Jews heard that you could get a visa to go to the Dutch West Indies, they asked him for a visa. But to go there, they had to get a transit visa via Japan. So these 2, Shion Sugihara and Jan, and he's got a name that I have difficulty in pronouncing, but I'll do it. It's Jan Zvortsnik. Please forgive me if I don't. Anyway, these 2 worked together, and they literally saved the lives of about 2,000 to 3,000 Jewish families. They had to go overland by train to Vladivostok, and then to Japan, and then they could come to Canada. Now, the Dutch consul, he knew that he wasn't allowed to give the visas because they had to have the governor of Curaçao's permission to get into Curaçao. But these 2 men really took sympathy on the Jewish, the people who were desperate to leave, and that's why the Israeli government recognized them as righteous among the nations. And among the families was the Kaplan children.
Which is what we're here for today.
Exactly. Yeah. The 2 Kaplan children, one was called Moses and one was called Nathan, and they got visas from Sugihara and the Dutchman to come to Canada, and they were coming to Canada because Sussman and Hindi was already here with a farm to welcome them. Okay? They just had to get here. So they, their story, now the only survivor is Nomi, and it's this lady here who looks like Shirley Temple. Now she is now 70 or 80s, she's quite old, let's say that. And she lives in Vancouver.
Okay.
So when I told her she looked like Shirley Temple, she said, passing through Moscow on the way to Vladivostok, I saw Shirley Temple movie in Moscow. And it was a big thrill for her to see a film with a little girl as the star. So anyway, she ended up here. They all ended up in Williamstown in this little farmhouse. Like, I don't know how many, there was maybe 15, 20, how many? I don't know, but there was lots.
How many acres?
No, the family members. They were pretty crowded, let's put it that way, in this little farmhouse. And they, the main thing was that the Williamstown people, although Canada was not was a bit anti-Semitic in those days. The Williamstown people hadn't heard. And basically they just took the Kaplan family as one of theirs, and they made friends, they went to school, and today, here in Cornwall, 74 years later, many Williamstown, not many, several Williamstown people who knew the Kaplans are here today, including this man here, Mac McGregor. So maybe I can carry on, maybe while you interview Mac McGregor.
Mr. McGregor?
Oh,
You're on camera. Do you have some memories of the Kaplan family?
Well, yeah, we lived right across the road. And my dad, I was quite young at the time, because I was born in 39, so I may have been 3 years old or so. But I remember going down to their farmhouse, and my father was pretty handy at repairing equipment and stuff like that. He was used to the kind of machinery they had, and they weren't used to it at all. So he would help them get it running, and so we were there pretty often.